Get ready for a deep dive into early Islam, but with a twist.
Mm.
Um, we're going to be exploring a lecture about Haram, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, and get this, her whole family is like incredible.
Yeah, it's not just one person. Like it's this whole family that's kind of intertwined with early Islamic history, you
So
know.
it's amazing. So it's kind of like a window into like what was it like back then for the people who were like right there when it was all like happening.
Exactly.
So the lecture starts off talking about the Ansar. So these are the people of Medina who like welcomed the Prophet and his followers. But what really jumped out at me was this like the incredible dedication to Islam within Haram's family. Like everyone was striving to serve Allah, but like to the max.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it makes you think about like the impact of family, right? Like what
Yeah.
kind of environment did they grow up in? Because for Haram's family, like piety and sacrifice, it was just like woven into their daily lives. It was like who they were. Imagine like growing up around people who were literally ready to like give their lives for what they believed in.
It's incredible. And speaking of family, so you know the famous companion Anas ibn Malik?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, he's actually part of this family too.
yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. Anas's own father actually didn't convert to Islam,
Really?
even though his siblings did. So it's like so interesting, you know?
Yeah.
It really makes you think about like even within the same family, like people can go on such different paths.
Totally. It highlights how complex faith can be, right? And how like even within the same family, individual choices are like so different. But it also shows like the strength of those who did convert. Like they were really committed even though their own brother chose a different path.
It's amazing. So now let's talk about some of these incredible acts of courage and sacrifice, because this family is full of it. So we hear about one of Haram's aunts. She loses her son in the Battle of Badr,
Oh.
which, you know, is like it's such a pivotal moment in Islamic history. And what really struck me was her reaction, you know. Imagine losing your child like that. But she immediately goes to the Prophet and she's like, I need to know, is my son in paradise?
Mm.
And when he confirms it, she accepts it with such like grace. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah. It really speaks to like the depth of belief. Like they weren't just, following a religion. They really understood like the afterlife and that helped them to like cope with such a huge loss.
Yeah. And it's also really interesting to see like the role of the prophet. He's not just a prophet, but he's also like a spiritual guide, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like a comforter, you know, in these really difficult times.
Right.
And then there's this other story about Anas's uncle who actually missed the Battle of Badr and like really desperately wanted to prove his commitment. So when the Battle of Uhud arrived, he like charged straight into the enemy lines and he's like shouting that he can smell paradise.
Wow. It's such a strong image. It really captures like the intensity of their beliefs, Like they weren't just fighting for a cause, they were fighting for their place in the afterlife, and that's what made them so brave.
Yeah, it's amazing. And to make it even more like intense, his sister, the one who lost her son in Badr, is the one who actually identifies his body.
Oh, wow.
And she can only recognize him by his fingertips, like
Wow.
because of the mutilation from the enemy.
Oh gosh, that's both like heartbreaking and just really really moving. It's a reminder of how brutal this conflict was,
Yeah.
establishing Islam. Like it wasn't just a peaceful process. It was violent. There was loss. There was suffering.
Yeah,
But it also speaks to the strength of these women. Like they weren't just victims of tragedy. They were active participants in the aftermath of these battles.
absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to Abu Talha. So this is Anas's stepfather.
Yeah.
And he's such an interesting character.
Yeah.
So he marries Anas's mother, but after the death of her first husband. But she sets one really important condition for their marriage.
What's that?
He has to convert to Islam.
Oh, wow. That's pretty significant. I mean, it shows how important Islam was becoming at the time. Like it wasn't just a personal choice, it was shaping like every aspect of their lives, like even marriage.
Exactly. And Abu Talha, he doesn't just convert. He becomes like a fierce warrior, like
Oh.
a real champion of the faith. In fact, the Prophet himself actually praised Abu Talha for his voice, which was so powerful that it struck fear into the hearts of the enemy.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. It shows you like the different aspects of these early Muslims, Like they weren't just spiritual, they were also like skilled warriors
Yeah.
and strategists. Abu Talha, he's a great example of that. He was like deeply faithful and also like a total badass on the battlefield.
Yeah, he was. And his commitment to the Prophet was like unwavering. Even during the Battle of Uhud, when like everything was going wrong, Abu Talib stayed right by the Prophet's side and offered himself as a shield. Like true loyalty.
Absolutely, yeah. And then, there's the story of his death, which is, it's almost like poetic. He
Yeah.
died at sea, and his body miraculously remained preserved for 7 days until they found land to bury him.
It's incredible. So we've talked about the paternal side of Enes's family,
Mm.
and it's just like story after story of martyrdom and faith. But now let's switch gears and talk about the maternal side, which is equally fascinating. We learn that Haram's other brother, he was also martyred, but this time it was in the Battle of Yamama, which was another like major conflict.
Right. It's just incredible how much loss this family endured. It really tells you a lot about, the times they lived in. There was constant war, constant violence. It was a dangerous time to be alive.
It really was. But in the midst of all of this, we have Haram herself. And she actually had a really unique connection to the Prophet. She was his maternal aunt, but through fostering.
Oh, wow. So they were very close.
Very close, yeah.
Hmm.
And that bond really played a big role, especially after she faced her own, like, massive losses. Because her husband and her eldest son, they both died in the Battle of Uhud.
Oh my goodness. It's hard to even fathom, receiving news like that. Not once, but twice. But like her sister-in-law, she shows this incredible strength, and patience. Like her faith just doesn't waver.
It's really inspiring. And then there's the story of her younger brother, Haram. And it's interesting because that's actually where she gets her nickname from, Haram, because she was like so motherly towards him. He was one of the first in their family to actually convert to Islam, and he was known for being like really dedicated to reciting and memorizing the Quran.
It's beautiful. It just paints this like picture of the early Muslim community. It's all about compassion and service. They really live their faith.
Yeah. But unfortunately, tragedy struck again. So Haram was martyred in the incident of Bir Mauna, where 70 companions were like ambushed and killed while they were actually teaching the Quran.
Oh, wow. This incident, it's not as well known as like the Battle of Badr or Uhud, but it's equally like devastating. It shows you the risks that these early Muslims took just to spread their message. It makes you really appreciate the sacrifices that, people made for our faith.
It does. And even in his final moments, Haram, he stayed strong. Like as he was being attacked, he cried out, "I have succeeded by the Lord of the Kaaba."
Wow, powerful words. Like even facing death, he was still so certain about, the afterlife. It's really a testament to like the transformative power of faith. Like even in the most difficult of times, it can give you this incredible sense of peace.
Yeah. So here's Haram. She's lost her husband, her eldest son, and now her beloved brother. And the Prophet, seeing her immense loss, he steps in and arranges for her to marry Ubadah ibn al-Samit, who's a very prominent and noble companion. It's just such a beautiful example of like compassion and taking care of your community.
It really is. It highlights this idea of social responsibility within Islam. Like the Prophet wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was also a community builder. He
Yeah.
really cared about the well-being of his followers.
Yeah, and Ubadah ibn al-Samit seems like a really exceptional person. He was known for his like exemplary character, and he even treated Haram's young son, Abdullah, as his own.
It's really heartwarming. It shows like the power of love and compassion even after loss. Like you can still build these new bonds and these new families.
Absolutely. So this is where the story gets like really interesting. So there's this narration where the Prophet visits Haram's home, and he's praying with her, her mother, her son, and an orphan. And while Haram is like picking lice out of his hair, the Prophet falls asleep and has this really vivid dream.
Okay, so this dream is important.
Very important. Yeah.
This is like a turning point in the story.
Yeah. So in this dream, he sees his followers on ships, and they're sailing like kings with crowns, and they're like conquering the seas. It's such a powerful image, right?
Mhm.
And it kind of foreshadows like the future expansion of the Muslim world through naval conquest.
Wow, so from the desert to the sea, that's a big shift.
A huge shift. And of course, Haram hears about this dream, and she's immediately like, "I want to be a part of this." Like she doesn't even hesitate. And the Prophet, in response, he actually prays for her to be included.
Wow. It just shows, how much faith she had and how much she wanted to like contribute to the growth of Islam, even if it meant like going into this totally unknown territory.
Yeah.
And it also shows like the Prophet's willingness to like listen to his followers, especially those who were so like sincerely devoted.
Yeah. But the story doesn't end there.
Hmm.
So the Prophet has a second dream, and this time it's a different group of people. And when Haram's like, hey, can I be in this one too? The prophet tells her, no, no, you're already in the first group,
Hmm.
the one destined for naval conquest.
So two dreams, and she's like already part of this incredible destiny.
It's amazing, and it really emphasizes like the importance of that first dream and the power of the prophet's prayer.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's incredible how this dream actually played out, like in real life.
Yeah.
So the prophet had this vision of like his followers conquering the seas, but they were desert people.
Yeah, it seems kind of impossible, right?
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. So, the Muslims, after defeating the Byzantine Empire, they actually gained a whole fleet of ships.
Really?
Yeah, but they were super hesitant to like actually use them. Like naval warfare, it was totally foreign to them.
I can imagine. Like fighting on land is one thing, but like being out on the open sea, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right, exactly. But the Byzantine Empire, they weren't just going to give up, so they kept attacking from their base in Cyprus. And this forced the Muslims to kind of like rethink their whole naval strategy.
So they finally decided to like take the plunge and create a naval force. But who did they choose to lead it? Like who was going to be in charge of this whole new fleet?
Well, remember Haram's husband, Ubada?
Yeah, the general.
Yeah, the skilled general. He was the perfect choice to lead this like pioneering expedition. I mean, think about it. The prophet's dream was actually starting to come true.
It's amazing how it all connects. So what about Haram? I mean, she was so determined to be a part of this whole, conquering the seas thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, remember the prophet even prayed for her to be included, right?
He did.
And she was what, like 75 years old at this point? But her faith and her sense of adventure, it was just unstoppable.
She's incredible.
And, she even narrated a hadith about the rewards of martyrdom at sea.
Wow. So it's like she kind of knew it was coming. Did she actually end up going with Ubada?
Yeah, she did. They set sail on this like historic voyage to Cyprus, the very first Muslim naval expedition. And as soon as their ship reached the shores and they opened the doors, Haram, she was so eager to get off, she jumped on her horse.
Oh no, don't tell me.
She fell from her horse and died instantly.
Oh wow. So the prophet's dream, it really did come true, but in such a like bittersweet
It
way.
really is a powerful and poignant moment in her story.
Yeah, it really is. So she died in Cyprus then. What happened after that?
She has this like unique honor of being the only companion buried in Cyprus, and there's a mosque built over her grave, a testament to her legacy, even in a place that's not a Muslim country.
It's amazing how one family's story can be so intertwined with like major historical events. I mean, what a legacy. What are some of the things we can like take away from all of this?
The story of Haram and her family, it's really about the power of faith. Like, even when they faced so much loss, their dedication to Allah never wavered. They were so courageous and resilient, and they were deeply committed to their community.
It's truly inspiring. It makes you think about like what role does faith play in your own life?
Yeah.
And how can we all be more like them,
Yeah.
facing challenges with that same spirit of dedication and resilience? It's just amazing to think about Haram, joining that first Muslim naval expedition to Cyprus. Like, can you imagine what that must have been like for
It
them?
was a huge moment, like a turning point, really. I mean, these were people from the desert going out onto the vast sea for the first time. It's pretty incredible.
And if Haram, I mean, we know she was so determined to be part of it all.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, remember, she was around 75 at this point, but she was just as strong in her faith as ever, maybe even more so. And she even talked about the rewards of martyrdom at sea.
It's almost like she knew.
Right.
Like she had this sense of what was to come. So they finally reach Cyprus, this like Byzantine stronghold. What happened then?
So the ship arrives, they open the doors, and Haram, she can't wait to get off. So she gets on her horse,
No.
and she falls, just like that. Dies instantly. It was a sudden end, to an incredible life.
It's amazing how the prophet's dream actually came true.
Yeah.
Like her desire to be a part of it, the prophet praying for her, and then it all like came together in this really poignant moment.
Yeah, it really makes you think about fate and destiny.
It does. So what happened then? She died in Cyprus.
She did, and she's actually the only companion buried there. And, there's a mosque built over her grave. It's a really powerful reminder of her legacy, even in a place that's, not a Muslim country.
It's amazing, like this whole family story. It's so intertwined with these major historical events.
Yeah. It is.
What a story.
Yeah.
So what can we take away from all of this? From the story of Haram and her family?
I think it's a story about faith, unwavering faith. Even in the face of so much loss, they were so dedicated, so courageous, and they really put their community first. And I think that's something we can all learn from.
It's a really powerful reminder that, like, no matter what challenges we face, we can always find strength in our faith, and that we should always strive to be, the best versions of ourselves, just like Haram and her family.